guys, thank you for joining me on yet another YouTube video. My name is Charmian. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you're enjoying this kind of series that I'm giving you guys right now, where I talk about everything that I care about, that I think is important, and I hope you're having a good time. All right, so let's get into it. Wait a minute. I didn't ask you guys to do this, but I think it should be obvious. Please subscribe, turn on your post notifications, and binge watch all my videos. It really helps me out and it makes me encouraged, makes me happy. I don't know. Consider this your gift to me, but money is also acceptable. Now let's get into it for real. All right. So this one is one of the most contentious debates anywhere, in churches, amongst ourselves, on the internet. Everyone wants to figure out who exactly should be doing housework, who exactly is responsible for most of the domestic labor in the house. And the reason why this debate continues to happen is because we all understand that the system at work currently is not really the best one. It leaves one party overwhelmed and the other party feeling entitled to people's labor for no apparent reason. And this is because, of course, historically and through the functions of religion and other traditions, women were seen as the custodians of housework. And this is, of course, just another manifestation of patriarchy. Women were supposed to do the care work at home and cater to those who left the house. I've heard a lot of things about this. There's a claim that this was done out of necessity. Men who had more physical strength were to use their strength for war and for hunting, which was considered more dangerous, whilst women tended to take care of the house, find water, take care of the children, cook, clean, and handle the farming. Farming was considered to be women's work. So because men spend so much time far away from the household, going to war, killing each other, hunting for days and days on end, women ended up taking up this role because they were the ones in the house. But the world doesn't function that way. And I can't say the system was wrong, never worked, it was not beneficial to society then. We're now just discussing this issue from the now. Is the system working, and is it still an equitable system? The answer is obvious. It's not. So before we get anywhere, let's just discuss and give definitions for what housework is. Housework in today's terms refers to the uncompensated domestic work usually done by wives and women in the home. And this includes the cleanliness and management of the home, the meals that are eaten within it, and the well-being of the people in it. So that's care from those who are ill. Taking care of those people is considered housework and is usually the responsibility of whoever is doing the management and the care of the home. So now as the world moves faster, as everyone is asked to do some kind of paid work, there have been conversations that have been brought up because of this. Now, there was a wave of feminism where women were pushing for their access into the workspaces. And during this wave of feminism, women were pushing forward the idea that they could do it all. But what we understand now in the fourth wave of feminism is that that's unsustainable and unrealistic, and that work or labor is all the same. We put labor on the same pedestal, and we understand that that needs to be divided in a way that is more just. So here's where this conversation comes. So there's always a debate about paid work versus unpaid work. People who labor in the home are working uncompensated, under unregulated conditions and hours, versus those who work in paid work, who usually have some kind of regulation and some kind of system in place to ensure that their own human rights are not abused or infringed upon. This is because, of course, there is a union that governs that kind of paid work, regardless of whether or not it's mining or accounting. All these fields have some kind of labor laws attached to them, and normally, unless the people are, of course, being exploited for reasons best known to the exploiter, there is some kind of regulation there. This regulation does not exist for unpaid work that happens in a domestic capacity. Now, that's actually a problem. If this work is unregulated and there are no governing rules or regulations to protect the well-being and the peace or the human rights of the people who are doing unpaid work, that means there's a huge space for exploitation to happen. And that's what tends to happen. Housework is continuous, it is always going to be there. You do a load of laundry today, there's one more a load of laundry that everybody is wearing at that particular moment that needs to be done. When you eat a meal, there's two more meals in a day that still needs to be eaten or that have already been eaten. So continuously round the clock there's work to be done. If you have some kind of a sick person or a child in the mix, that's a 24-hour job and the care work continues. Cleaning, an everyday task. So if one person has the task of doing unpaid work, unregulated unpaid work in the house, this means this burden lies exclusively to them. But there are also other areas that need to be looked at outside of this gross exploitation that is a result of the unregulated nature of domestic work. So because unpaid work in the house is not considered as important as paid work, those who do paid work are given the luxury of rest. So whoever brings in actual currency is the person who gets to rest. And this is because, of course, because of labor laws and civil rights movements many years ago, it was decided upon that 8 hours a day was the maximum a person should be working, especially without any other extra compensation. So that means if you work an 8 to 5, a 9 to 6, whatever kind of hour job, you're supposed to be working those particular 8 hours. This dynamic does not exist for those who are in exploitable, unpaid work at home. Let's use an example of what a typical Zimbabwean wife's day is supposed to look like if she has a husband and children. So if she has a child who's relatively young, she's probably been up most of the night breastfeeding, soothing, and doing all these things to ensure that the child is okay. Losing valuable sleep and rest that is, of course, detrimental to her own health and her own existence and her own well being. Over and above that, she's supposed to be up hours in advance to ensure that her husband has everything catered for her. So to make sure that the person who does paid work is bathed, clean, fed, whilst the other person doesn't pull any tasks. When this person goes away, they will do the laundry for this person, prepare the meals that they're meant to eat, make sure the house is habitable, whilst simultaneously taking care of their other children's needs. And if the children are much older, feeding them, clothing them, monitoring them, doing other care work side by sides to her other physically exhausting, uncompensated, unregulated work. But it doesn't end for her 8 hours later. When her partner comes back home, or whoever she lives with, who's responsible for, who does paid work outside of the home, they will get to come back into the house and rest, be catered for more than 8 hours after whenever this woman has woken up, and the cycle continues. So, of course, this arrangement still doesn't work, even if the woman is exclusively doing domestic work. The domestic work still needs some kind of ethics to govern it. If everyone is working 8 hours a day, everybody must work 8 hours a day, and the other work must be shared for it to be more equitable. But this situation replicates itself even when the women are working both in paid work and in uncompensated, unregulated work in the home. And that again is a problem. This is where patriarchy comes in. It's no longer an issue of what you're bringing and what you can do. This, of course, confirms that patriarchy is the guiding system in all these relationships. And this is what stops people from equitable domestic work conditions. Now, when women are working in paid work versus unregulated work, they still have to wake up earlier than their husbands, still cater to them, feed them, clothe them, clean their own homes, spend the night awake, come back from work and cook to make sure their family is well fed. And if they choose to outsource this labor to a third party who will do the domestic work regulated and uncompensated, even though that's very debatable again, because regardless of the circumstance, people who do domestic work are always going to be uncompensated because the field remains unregulated. They will still have to do most of this work whilst the other partner does very little. And if they do anything, they're praised for it. So what we know is currently our functioning and our understanding of domestic work is warped. The responsibility of the labor lies solely with one party, and that is extremely overwhelming and detrimental to the well-being of the people who have to carry much of this labor. What we know from the statistics is that men with wives or who have domestic carers who handle their domestic affairs and their share of their domestic labor tend to outperform others in the workspace. So they might increase their actual earnings, and that's how beneficial not having to do domestic work is. So likewise, we know and we can deduce from that that women who have to do domestic work will fail miserably or will have to work extremely hard to gain anything reasonable in a paid work capacity. But anyway, this is a big conversation. Let's just move on to whether or not it's possible to make this equitable. The truth is, I'm just one person. I understand domestic work. I do domestic work every single day. And what I know is there are a lot of complexities to this situation. But there's definitely something people in paid work can do to ensure that the situation is less exploitative. So the first thing anybody in the home, regardless of whether or not they do unpaid or regulated and compensated work, is to ensure that they clean after themselves, that we take domestic work as a personal responsibility and that we pull our own weight. Wipe after you've made a mess. Make sure you spread your own bed. You put away clothes where they're supposed to be put. Wash your own cup and plate when you've had or when you've eaten from it. And it's okay to volunteer to do household chores like do the dishes after a big meal, especially at night, to show that you're aware of the unpaid, exploitative, and continuous nature of housework. The second thing I suggest a person can do to make this situation less exploitative is to volunteer to do some large chores. For example, you can alternate when cooking big meals. You can cook supper maybe 3 nights, 2 nights, however many nights you can, or perhaps even a day a week. If you use a washing machine to do the laundry, you can do that at any time of the day. Just sort clothes, put them in the washing machine, do a few loads of laundry. And if you don't and you rely on hand washing, join your partner or whoever is doing unpaid work in the home whenever they're doing laundry on the days that you're off. This one is very important. Refrain from making a server out of whoever does unpaid, uncompensated work in the home. Don't ask them for favors or tasks unnecessarily. Don't ask them to bring you a cup. Don't ask them to bring you some tea, some juice when you're not ill or physically compromised and can do the work yourself. Choose instead to be the one who goes and makes yourself a cup of tea so that they're not burdened with more micro tasks. And the second from last item is that you should just avoid making a mess. Be careful. Don't run with the cup of water in your hands. I mean, of course, once you've made a mess, clean after yourself. Don't wait on somebody. There's no mysterious person who's made out of machinery and steel who's going to do this work. They also get tired. And be mindful of how long this person has to work, especially, again, since housework is a continuous task. And lastly, this is a big one, I think, is to ensure that you do housework on your off day. One of you cannot get an off day that the other one doesn't get. If housework still needs to be done on that day, do housework together. Or perhaps, if you can afford to, bring in somebody who you're willing to pay, maybe a third party, to handle all the domestic work on a day so that both of you or all of you who do this kind of work in the home gets to rest. That way the situation is more equitable and everybody's happy. So those are my opinions on unpaid work and domestic work and making things a lot more equitable. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you've already thumbs up this video, turned on your post notification, and that you're already subscribed to the channel. Now you don't have to leave the channel just yet. There's so many other videos to watch, and I'll just leave maybe 2 on the screen for you to watch and enjoy and have a good time with. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.